Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea. I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And tonight we're going to be discussing the directorial debut of Alice Waddington as we look at 2019's Paradise Hills, a pastel goth sci-fi fantasy thriller in which a young girl, Uma, wakes up to find she's trapped on a strange island called Paradise, where she's told that she's been booked into a treatment centre of sorts, but is everything what it seems? Certainly we'll find out tonight as we look at this film. As I said, this is the directorial debut of Alice Waddington, and it also features a script by Nacho Vigalondo, who is probably best known for Time Crimes, but also did films such as Colossal, Puka, ABC's of Death, Open Windows, and VHS Viral, amongst his credits. And Kim, this was a film you'd seen before. This is the first time watching myself. What are your sort of initial thoughts on Paradise Hills?
Well, I mean, I really like Paradise Hills, and I think it was like I was super excited about it when I first finished seeing it at Fantasia Film Festival, and I was like telling you about how great it was and how awesome, and it's the whole world of Paradise Hills that really, is really so captivating. And I mean, we're going to discuss more of it later, obviously, but I think that there's a lot of elements here that works pretty well, and at the same time, for a debut effort, it's done, there's a lot of style to it.
Definitely so. As we said already, this is a pastel goth feature, and for those slightly confused by the term, it seems to be a new upcoming genre that's really come out of nowhere, really, and perhaps in many ways the sort of bastard offspring of the gothic Lolita genre, or subculture of goth culture, should we say. Here the dark and gloom of castles are replaced with a more lighter and obviously pastel color palette, as well as moving the whole concept from the gothic castles to, should we say, the dollhouse, as certainly the girls featured in this film are portrayed and shown more as being living dolls than anything than we're sort of used to in the sort of more traditional gothic sense. This is, as I said, this is a film visually, it's just absolutely fascinating when I saw the trailers, and that was kind of what made me want to pick it for my own pick here in the After Hours sort of portion of our season. And I mean, this is a film that was also made incredibly cheap. I mean, it was only made for a mere $10 million, which when you compare it to what everyone else is making their films for, it certainly quite makes it only the more astounding, and it does actually look quite stunning in places. Certainly Waddington's sort of background in photography really comes into effect here, and she's creates a world that feels very immersive on the surface, and it's only sort of backed up by the rather great cast that she's assembled here, which includes Awkwafina, Mila Jovovich, and Jeremy Ivan, as well as Danielle MacDonald. All of this headed
Emma
up
Roberts,
by
maybe?
I was just about just building up to Emma Roberts. So I said all this headed up by Emma Roberts, who, as I said, who plays Uma, and gets to sport a nice pastel pink bob for most of the film. So in terms of the cast, I mean, how did you find this cast here? Because obviously Awkwafina's currently on the rise, and Emma Roberts, despite her aunt being Julia Roberts, is never quite hit it off in the same way that her aunt did. She certainly had numerous appearances in things such as like We're the Millers. She was in American Horror Story, and she was also in Scream Queens as well.
All good.
Yes. So yeah, how did you find the cast here?
I feel like Emma Roberts is very underrated. She's always in these very indie films, and a lot of her films are a lot of times very similar in nature, and like the style of movie that it's in. They're in some kind of, like, I remember watching her in Art of Getting By, and then there's something else that she's in, that she's constantly in this kind of same type of movie. And I think something that's more action would probably be like Nerve, maybe, that was in something a little bit bigger that she was in. But, that's the thing, is Emma Roberts is for me, I find she's a pretty good actress, and it's one that I really like to check out her movies, and I think that was one of the main reasons, other than, you know, obviously Mila Jovovich, which I obviously like because of just, you know, I think she's interesting. I mean, to see her outside of her Alice roles particularly makes it feel very good to see, like, what else she has to offer. And I think, you know, Duchess is probably one of my favorite roles that she's done so far.
Yeah.
Just because of, you know, it's not her specifically, but also, like, that role itself is, you know, so, I don't know, manipulative, maybe. I don't know how you say that word. It's like at the tip of my tongue. I don't know how to say it.
Manipulative.
Like, huh?
Manipulative?
Manipulative, yeah. That's one way to say it.
Okay.
I feel like there's another word for it, but I can't really quite get there. But either way, I mean, like, because the other ones here, like Awkwafina, I've seen her before in Ocean's 8. And I really liked her there. I think that was one of the better roles I've seen her in. And obviously I like her in this one. I think, you know, her whole character design is pretty nice. Especially, like, the appearance part with, like, her spiky headphones and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And then, you know, but then, I mean, I really like Danielle MacDonald also, but then at the same time, I haven't really watched her other movie, which was a pretty big hit, but I've never got around to watching it. Patty Cakes. So, you know, like, Danielle MacDonald, I don't really know too much about because, like, I haven't seen, I really like her role here because she kind of offers that kind of bit of a difference because all of them, you know, all the characters they design here has their own issues. Like, their own societal issues. That's why they're in this kind of, like, reform school. And, you know, for Danielle MacDonald, I mean, I've never seen her previous movie was Patty Cakes. I think that really, you know, kind of set her on the map a little bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, I really liked her also. I mean, it'll be interesting to see her in other roles in this, obviously, because, you know, to be fair, this movie was pretty much through the eyes. It was like it wasn't a first person perspective, but we were following the character of Emma Roberts as Uma the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with Emma Roberts' character, she is essentially the main focus here. We do obviously get hints of the other girls here, and certainly when it comes to these other girls, I mean, certainly Chloe and Yu, played by Danielle MacDonald and Awkwafina respectively, certainly the most fleshed out of the characters. Everyone else felt like they were just kind of there, as sort of like background dressing. Obviously with the Duchess, here, as you said already, being played by Mila Jovovich, she's probably one of the strongest elements of the film, and it's kind of nice to see her doing a film which isn't directed by her husband. But at the same time, it's hard to shift there's so many elements of the Alice sort of character that she carries across here. There was sort of moments where I felt I was like watching Alice in a prettier dress. And
well, I mean, I'd argue, like, I mean, I'm pretty good. I'm really well versed in the whole Alice thing because I really like the character. And to be fair, the Duchess has a lot more lines to say. You know, like, there's a lot more dialogue because she's more like, you know, trying to listen to these girls and make them talk to her. And, you know, she plays kind of like this kind of like mother, headmistress type of role where she's there to listen to you. It's like her cover is to be compassionate. But in reality, you know, when things turn around, she obviously isn't because, you know, there's a lot more secrets to her character.
yeah, certainly so. And I think I like the way that her characters sort of developed. I mean, initially she's sort of introduced as this sort of headmistress style character who's going to be there to mentor the girls and to help them correct the faults which have led them to be put on the island, because we get the general opinion that all of them have been sent to the island because they're not meeting their various families' statuses. And certainly this is a world where you're either an upper or a lower, and these girls are all belong to families of uppers, so they're all coming from privilege. And we obviously, when we look at for example, we look at Chloe. Her family wanted to be, slim and like her sisters, so supermodel pretty. You is needing to have her common roots sort of straightened out because she's been staying with her aunt and uncle, and she's not quite fitting in with that upper crowd. And Uma is kind of like gone rogue on her mother because her family's essentially gone bankrupt, so she's being married off so that they can maintain that upper status, but at the same time she's being forced into marrying a man who she describes as a complete sociopath, and who in the few sort of snippets of footage we see of him is pretty damn creepy, it has to be said.
Creepy and cringy.
But then again, I don't know if it's because I watch so much bad reality TV that so much of the cringiness just sort of washed over me. When he was like talking about being a sensitive guy, and it's like, I think that's just every
on repeat.
I know, it's just you watch enough X on the Beach and whatnot, and it suddenly starts washing over you.
Well, you kind of acknowledge it, and then you kind of laugh through it, and then that's it.
I have to say though that when they decide to give her like the bit of rough love interest as her secret boyfriend stumbles onto the island, Marcus here played by Jamie Arvin, and I was like, why are we putting this in? This does not need to be in here at all. And ultimately he proves to be a character that adds nothing to the film whatsoever, other than just an excuse to work some pretty boy in there.
Well, it's really to make that, big escape plan come into play right at the end, and kind of see like the reaches of, obviously the Duchess and the school and the Paradise Hills school that they're on, right? They're in, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's the character itself is very disposable, but the purpose of it being there was kind of one of the most contrived, I guess.
Yeah, it just felt that if you put him on there just for the whole escape plan, we've already established an escape plan with Armania, one of the other girls on the island, and it's all like, well, we've already got an escape plan put in place. Well, you were just excess to purpose here, so it just made me just every time he was on screen, he has like no chemistry whatsoever with Emma Roberts' character, and it just felt like just there you're padding this out. You're either padding this out or you just put him in there because you know that young girls are going to see some pretty young thing.
Is he a pretty young thing? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not a teenage girl, am I? I'm just some mean-spirited...
I happen to not be a teenage girl either, so...
I'm just some mean-spirited, middle-aged guy over here trying to worry about the state of the world. And, trying to find distraction in this fantasy feminist respinning of The Prisoner, which essentially this is. It's, we have a girl, she's thrown into a situation that she doesn't quite fully understand. Nobody's exactly forthcoming with answers. The only thing that's missing is the fact that everyone has names instead of numbers, and we're pretty much there. Oh, and a giant balloon. I guess that would have been the other thing it would have been if we were going to go full Prisoner there, but I digress.
I don't know, talking about that, I mean, it's a little bit, for me, I don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, Prisoner, and I've never seen
never
it,
watched
so
The Prisoner?
No, I've never seen The Prisoner.
Never mind.
Yeah, but for me, like, I think right when the movie started, it felt a lot like, I think the whole time why I really, really was fascinated by Paradise Hills is that my connection is, I see so much of Alice in Wonderland, like the animated version, come to life, kind of like, just from the opening movement of it, when she opens up her eyes and then she's in this place with this tree, and then, the door opens, and then you go out, and then there's, this whole, like, rose bushes, and, there's this big emphasis on different, like, contrast of red and white, and these beautiful bright colors, and this whole yard that looks a bit like, like a labyrinth and stuff, like all these hedges and all that sort of thing. And it's so like, enchanting, I guess, the garden and all these like beautiful colors that come in. And then obviously, you know, as she goes through this and she's being led to see Duchess and stuff, or she's running away and whatever. Like it's just incredible to just see this beautiful scene that they've like that whole, I guess, the whole landscape that they're on. Because I mean, Paradise Hills is filmed on Canary Islands, and I mean, it's such a beautiful set, like a beautiful setting.
This thing, the whole setting does look really interesting, and as I said, I love the whole dollhouse aesthetic that they're really sort of going for here. Everyone dressed in white in these almost like paper style dresses. Everything is designed from a very sort of fashion sort of angle. So if you sort of think of like Fifth Element,
yeah. I believe that director because I listened to a bit of the Q&A when she was at Fantasia, and I think she does have a fashion background, and that's why there's so much emphasis on fashion in the film as well, like the beautiful dresses that, you know, the Duchess wears, obviously. Like everything is beautiful, right from, you know, the hat she wears all the way till, you know, the flowing dress that she has, and you know, all the girls are in a different, like, designed, and, you know, they're kind of like little packages of prettiness, you know.
Yeah, I mean, her background was working in Harper's Bazaar, where she was doing promotional stills and directing fashion films, and there she was working photographer and assistant photographer for like Harper's Bazaar and Neo 2 and several other sort of fashion magazines before she made the move into doing sort of like more storyboard sort of art and sort of like moving into more like filmmaking. I mean, her original sort of debut was the 11-minute short Disco Inferno, which was released in 2015. So this is actually her first full-length film. 2 years after that, because this film was released in 2017. But it's only just now hit on the been sort of distributed. You can currently get it on Netflix, certainly here in the UK. So it's you saw it in the festival circuit, though, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, but certainly from what I've seen her in when she's talking about it, I mean, she's saying that she wants to like create this sort of like science fiction fantasy with a female audience in mind. As she really wanted to make something for like those girls that she saw like herself, just interested in like these nerdy things. And she mentioned already things like Alice Wonderland and and you can see elements of that throughout the film. It just at the same time it just feels like something's missing from this film. On the surface it looks very pretty, but underneath it just feels a little flimsy. Certainly in terms of the scripting, it could have really sort of tightened up some of the plot holes, and certainly many of the characters just felt very one-dimensional. When perhaps I've been spoiled with, like I would say, when we look at the works of like Gondry, who creates these sort of elaborate sort of worlds and has characters with more depth, and you kind of look at this film and you think, oh, I'm going to have all these characters are going to have all these sort of like interesting angles and elements to them, and unfortunately it feels them for a lot of the time they just feel very sort of surface detail only.
But I don't know, maybe it's I don't know whether it's a bit deliberate because of the situation that they're in. It's meant to be a very straight, like, to me, the reason why I like it is because it's a very straightforward story. The depth is in, you know, the secret that they're trying to unveil, and not about, you know, each of these characters, because obviously there is a lot of characters, and like I said before, everything is in general, we're following the eyes of Emma Roberts. We're following the eyes of Uma. So with that, you know, when you choose doing a movie through one person's point of view, you always have that kind of like lacking of everyone else, because it's all kind of like what you see, like what that character sees and what you see is developing. So on one hand, it helps the story kind of have that, you know, the story kind of unveils itself slowly. And it kind of keeps a lot of secrets because you don't see the other side of, you know, what's behind kind of like the curtains, right? Until the curtains lift. But at the same time, I think I can see where you're talking about, because, you know, with something like this, you kind of seem to kind of embrace the character you're with a lot more than the other ones that you're with, right? So you have, like, you know, Awkwafina and Chloe, which obviously because they're roommates, they, you know, she understands these characters a little bit more because, you know, you hear them talk about their stories more and, you know, what they have to lose and why this is important to them or why this isn't as important to them. Whereas, you know, you have other characters which feel very important, like Amarna, played by, you know, Isa Gonzalez. And her character is supposed to feel like there's more depth. And then things, you know, kind of happen between, like, they have this really strong connection. And then that side of the story never really expands as much as it should, I think. Like, it's just to edit it out, or maybe there was, you know, I don't know what happened, but, you know, like, it's not as, like, that character, like, has so much, but, like, it has so much to offer to the story, but then everything it offers feels like, I'm not sure whether, like, it feels like it flows properly.
I mean, obviously, spoiler alert, what did you think of the end game for this film? Because I kind of liked it. It was felt very, perhaps a little too Stepford Wives in many ways for myself, but, you know, it manages to just about pull it off, thanks to some interesting visuals and just how it's sold to us. I thought it was rather good, and then we decided to go rather bonkers with what the Duchess actually is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously with the big sort of twist, I mean, did that play well for yourself, or?
I think, you know, obviously because I'm a fan of this movie, and watching it a second time, and knowing the twist, I still had a lot of fun watching it. So, I mean, for me, I thought the twist is, like, really clever. And I think one of the main joys of watching this was watching my husband see if he could guess that big twist that was coming up. So, I mean, I think the twist is pretty nice. I don't know which one you mean. Is it just, like, the first or the second? You know, obviously we have the twist before the reveal of the Duchess, right? What the Duchess actually is. But I like both of them. I think that, you know, the Duchess reveal is probably one that I think is very creative. Whereas the other one is kind of like, you kind of have an idea that something like that is happening at this point. Because watching it a second time, you kind of have this, you know, you catch the details that you missed when, you know, it's like the big screening at like a Fantasia premiere or something like that, right?
Of course.
So, you know, you're catching these little details that I actually missed the first time, whether it was in dialogue or in just like the sounds that's going on and whatnot too, like the effects that are going on, or little things that happen in the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What about you? Did you like the twist or no? Or?
I mean, obviously the main twist of what's actually going on at Paradise Hills is good. As I said, if you've seen Stepford Wives, then it's going to seem rather familiar to yourselves. As for just turning the Duchess into some weird Poison Ivy style hybrid thing, it just felt like that doesn't make sense to anything else that's happening here. So I suppose they needed an ending of sorts, and that certainly gives it one. So
I don't know. I think for me, I don't know. I like things that are really like out the left field, right? Like for me, it didn't need to make sense because the Duchess was kind of like this really like this mysterious character from the beginning. Like obviously you watched her character develop, and I think that's one of the best things of the Duchess's character and what makes her one of the strongest characters in the movie. And that's because, you know, as we watch in the beginning, she starts from being this very kind of like compassionate mother figure kind of thing that leads these girls to this character who kind of like flips out on them and becomes very violent. And then you eventually see this other side of her, which is very manipulative. And then the end game of it turns her into just this character that is kind of like reflective of a few things that she talks about. And it's kind of like, you know, this, I just like the fantasy behind it. And I'm like really big on like fantasy that is like things you've never seen before. Yeah. And, you know, obviously this transformation is one that kind of like really is out there. And I really like that, you know, that creative element to it. And And I think that's one of the things that, maybe it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the whole spectrum of things. But I think it needed that kind of creativity behind it because of just, just like the style of the movie here and just the artistic elements of here kind of rendered something a little bit more, I don't know, something of a darker but colorful ending, I guess. I don't know how you describe it. It's very weird. I just want to know, other than this, what do you feel about, because obviously this is deemed as kind of like a sci-fi movie. And in certain ways, the fantasy is obviously, like I said, very, very apparent here. But what do you feel like the sci-fi part is very in the background, right? You can barely call this a sci-fi movie because you really can only see it in the beginning with, the hovering cars. And then kind of like a metallic thing with their costumes and stuff like that. But
there's no way that you can really call this a sci-fi movie at all. Yes, you have some fantastical elements in this film, but it's far from a sci-fi movie. Everything's far too grounded for that.
Because I feel like perhaps where the sci-fi comes in is in that, that big twist that we have, right? And that would give it a little bit more of like a sci-fi technological turn and things, right?
Perhaps
I wonder if that's where the sci-fi elements come in.
Well, perhaps if they were cyborgs or androids, maybe we'd get that. But it could just be. It's as I said. It's just a straight up thriller, if a more fantastical one, because of obviously the art direction and styling that runs throughout the film. It's very hard to call this anything remotely science fiction because as I said, these elements can be so written off into other genres. So the any sort of sci-fi elements that are in it are so subtle. They just felt like an almost misplaced to call it a sci-fi movie. If anything, I would call it a sort of a fantastical thriller.
Definitely,
because certainly those fantasy elements shine a lot stronger than the sci-fi elements do throughout this film, and certainly the thriller element is very key to the film as well.
Yeah, and I mean, just a final thought on this is really the fact that I'm starting to really I'm a big person. I really love things about big on romance and stuff like that. But I like movies that now are, when they're focused on one objective, to stay there and not go on the romantic angle. And while there was a lot of romantic little tangents here, I guess, it never dove into them too much. It makes it a little disposable, but at the same time I kind of like that focus of, now that we know something's wrong, we need to escape. We need to figure out what's wrong and leave kind of thing. And I think that's what I appreciated the most out of this. Other than, obviously all the fantasy and colorfulness and pastel and stuff.
Certainly as I said, the design of the film is very nice to see, and it's certainly something that we've seen in a couple of other places more recently. And it's something I would like to see more of. I love the whole pastel goth aesthetic. I just if they can continue to find interesting ways to carry across that dollhouse aesthetic, would be really fun to see in what ways it could be further explored. And I think this was the problem. I felt that I was sold on one sort of concept, and it just never felt that it was playing up to the full potential that was sort of sold to me in the trailer here. I thought it was going to be a lot more creepy, a lot more sort of intense, the world around it, but she settles so quickly into her environment. It's kind of astounding, really.
Yeah, it's a bit more. I guess it's a bit more of a. It's a bit more of a slow burn in any ways, or a quieter movie, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. I've never watched a trailer, so I don't know how it was sold as a trailer. Because when I watched it, there was no trailer. You just kind of walked into it blind. But yeah, I mean, I think in any way, I still think I appreciated a lot of how the movie was filmed. There's a bit of Paul W.S. Anderson in this. It's really weird, but I felt that way because of the long hallways and those long shots, and there was a lot of those little alleyways that was going on. And then it was just a lot of the lighting and whatnot. A lot of the cinematography is very, very done. It's done really nicely here. And it's going to be really nice to, I think, obviously this is just a debut film for Alice Waddington. Yeah. And I'm going to be really interested to see like what type of project she goes into next, because obviously I feel like cinematography wise, she has the skills. She might just need maybe she just needs a better script to film or whatever, you know.
I mean, her next film is going to be called Scarlet, and it's going to be through Netflix. So, as of yet, we got no further details on what's happening with that or who's going to be in it. So, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, how she follows this up, whether she chooses to do something different or whether she chooses to make something in a similar sort of vein. As I said, it remains to be seen on that respect. Personally, I mean, I'm happy. I would love to see more Awkwafina. I feel that she, with this film, I mean, even though she's more of a supporting character, she still manages to fare extremely well, and she's quickly becoming this actress to watch. And it's kind of funny the fact that she obviously starts off as this hip hop star, tapping into this very sort of crude style of hip hop with songs about her vag, and now she's sort of like quickly managed to turn herself into a very decent sort of actress. I mean, you mentioned already she was in Ocean's 8. She was in more recently in The Farewell, which received a lot of critical acclaim. And it's just every time she turns up in something, it's always exciting to see. And the fact that she is so able to just, you never feel like, oh, I'm just watching Awkwafina do a role, much like, which I find is the problem with Emma Roberts, is the fact that every role she plays, it seems to be just a sort of a spin on what we've seen her play before. Whereas when we look at sort of Awkwafina, you can look at her roles in like Ocean's 8, and you look at her in Crazy Rich Asians. So two very completely different roles, and then we compare it to The Farewell again, and it's different all again. So she's still, I think she still remains she's sort of like the shining highlight of this film, even though she's just a supporting cast. And I think she still continues to be a highlight and someone that we should be watching.
For sure. I agree.
I think with this film, I perhaps went in with too high expectations. I was left slightly disappointed that the script didn't live up to the potential of the imagery that I'm being sold here, which is kind of a shame, really. It's, especially because it's not exactly, you know, a first-time writer that is working here on the film. I mean,
well, I mean, it's co-written, so I guess in some ways the story is originally by, like, the idea of the whole story is by the director herself.
Yep.
But she had gotten two people to write it for her, and obviously one of them is Nacho Vigalondo.
Yep.
And the other is Brian DeLue, which I don't know what that person did, so that person wrote Daniel Isn't Real, which is surprising because Daniel Isn't Real is really good. So anyways, either way, I mean, I think that, you know, I think maybe as a collab effort, or maybe just the story itself coming, or maybe it was supposed to be like a lot of depth and editing took out a lot of the things. Any reason could happen for how this movie was executed in the way it was, or how the script felt like there was flaws, right?
I think I need to see more from her as a director to see how her establish herself more.
I'm gonna be like super honest, and that, like, for me, I think that sometimes I'm a little bit like, whenever I go to festival films, and it's not like, you know, Takashi Miike or something, you know, you happen to be like a little bit more, like, for me, I'm a little bit more forgiving because there's that surprise element. And I think that for me, what it is my first viewing of it was like zero expectations. I went to this movie seriously with just a blurb of what the movie was about and an image. So I went into this completely blind. And I think that did me wonders, because I've learned, like, for a really long time now, and that's one of the reasons why I don't watch trailers anymore, is to not have expectations is to really just either know nothing about the movie or go into the movie based on very little that has attracted you, to see if what they're trying to sell you with just one image, like, with just like the poster, really like kind of represents itself well. So that way, you know, when things happen and there's surprises and stuff and twists like that, I think the initial experience, it was so good that when I watched it again, I felt like it still lived up to
Okay.
it. So, like, I can see how, like, on a second viewing, like, I was a little bit more, you know, there was a lot more details. I can catch other things and whatnot. But you know, I think watching this, you know, obviously a second time, I did see a little bit more, you know, the flaws. And it wasn't, you know, as gripping as the first time that I watched it.
So for viewing, what would you pair with this one then? 'Cause it's a bit of an unusual one, isn't it? So
Took me a little while, but I think, like, for me, I would say, like, obviously I already mentioned it before, there are huge links for me, like, to think about it in, you know, like Alice in Wonderland. Like the animated version. I don't want to go into, like, the
better one,
the other version. Yeah. So, yeah, no. So we're talking about, you know, like, the Disney animated version. I feel like a lot of those scenes almost feel like it's replicated onto the scene in many ways. And, you know, if you think about it in certain ways, like, the Duchess feels a little bit like the Red Queen, which is, you know, like, very weird because, you know, when you think about Resident Evil, Alice plays like, you know, Alice in Wonderland, kind of parallel. And she's controlled by, you know, the Red Queen or something. So, anyways, I found that kind of funny to think about. And then, you know, obviously, I want to go a little bit of a different way because of the movie and just, you know, like how when you talked about the whole dollhouse effect, I actually connected it to Dollhouse, the TV series, which, you know, only has 2 seasons, but
that's
I
one
think,
great
you know,
season and a second where it's sort of like, oh, we're not going to get another season, so we'll give it a really weird ending.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, you know, when you talk about kind of like, if you want to go from, like, say this one to kind of like, you know, let's say season 1 of Dollhouse, you kind of have this this much more well implicated, modernized sci-fi kind of style, which maybe this sci-fi is lacking in you know, in Paradise Hills. Obviously, those are my 2 further viewing. I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
First one that I would recommend would be The Fall by Tassim. This is very similar in many ways to sort of Pan's Labyrinth, as a 1940s stuntman is recovering in hospital from a stunt that went wrong, and he starts telling a story to this young girl who's also in the hospital suffering from a broken arm, and basically sets all these tasks and things to gather around the hospital, as unaware that she starts carrying out with him, unaware that he's actually trying to commit suicide, but at the same time crafting this fantastical world that the film constantly switches back and forth between. It's a film shot without a single drop of CGI in it, and it looks absolutely stunning. And unsurprisingly, it's from the same director who gave us The Cell. The other film that I want to throw out there would be Ready or Not, which is a more recent one. It's in a young bride finds that her new family that she's married into have a very unique tradition, as she has to survive being hunted by them. I thought this is a film that was a lot of fun, and I did originally think that it was old Harley Quinn herself who was the lead role, but it actually turned out not to be.
Yeah. Well, this is what, you know, Ready or Not I haven't seen yet, but it was in the same season as the same year that Paradise Hills was premiered at Fantasia. Really? Yeah, but this is with Samara. Yeah, same year, last summer, I think. Yeah, so I mean, this is with Samara Weaving, and you know, obviously, Ready or Not is high on my list because Samara Weaving has been just cranking up some amazing movies, you know, obviously starting with, you know, Mayhem and then going into The Babysitter. Yeah, so I mean, Ready or Not is one that, you know, I really, really want to check out.
Cool. So, yeah, those would be my personal picks there for things to watch with this. So it's a unique film, and I think it's certainly the pastel goth genre is certainly something that'd be fun to see other directors experiment with and see what else it can be done with it. Certainly, I think there's certainly a lot of interesting ideas that could be explored throughout this particular style. So I look forward to seeing what else does come of it. So, well, that brings us to the end of another season. Thank you as always for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed these After Hours episodes as much as we've obviously enjoyed bringing our season that we've just obviously had. We're looking back at the filmography of Ang Lee. But as every season comes to a close, it is of course time to look forward to the season which lies ahead. So Kim, where are we going to be going for season 5?
Oh, season 5, wow. So fast. Season 5, we're going with, a director that is also fairly well known. But we're also changing kind of, the genre of movies, I guess. And we're going with David Fincher. And obviously we're kicking off with Alien 3.
The chef's kiss of the Alien franchise. A perfect film throughout. Or perhaps not. We'll certainly find out on the first episode of our next season. But David Fincher, the former music video director and director also of commercials, who led the charge for these Wonder Kid directors and moving into feature films in a class that also featured Spike Jonze, Michel Gondry, and sort of paved the way for the likes of Mark Romanek to also experiment on larger canvases. Here we have a director who's going to be very interesting to look at, and I think certainly going to be one of our more popular choices when we come to look at the directors we've looked at previously. I think he's certainly going to be one of the popular ones again, and certainly he has a wide variety in his of films that he's made over his career. So it's going to be certainly an interesting one to dive into those and look a bit deeper, and also perhaps check out some of the projects which came before his movie career. So that is all to come. If you haven't done already though, please do like and hit the like and subscribe button. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're also on Instagram. And you can also check out our full blog, which is at moviesandtpodcast.wordpress.com, which has a complete archive of episodes, not only the After Hours and the Shark Week episodes, but all 4 seasons that we've done as well. So you can go back in and check that out there. But thank you so much for listening, and thank you to my co-host Kim. And we'll be back next time, kicking off season 5 as we start a trek for the dark and wonderful world of David Fincher. Until then, good night.